I presented the catastrophic situation, the nightmare, like Marshall always says in the narrative. No, if you don't do this, this is going to happen. But if you do this, then it might turn out different. And I think that's where we got them.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Socially Democratic, your weekly center-left politics and organizing podcast out every Friday that dives into the progressive campaigns, issues of the day, and the people leading from home and abroad. Today's episode is a part of a special collaboration between Socially Democratic Podcast and the Leading Change Network. It's a 4-series episode released each Friday in July 2024. Leading Change Network is a global community of organizing practice and learning, working to build people power for a more just, sustainable, and democratic world. We use an evolving framework developed by Marshall Gant at the Harvard Kennedy School and his associates. Through our programs, we work to connect ideas, build learning spaces, and develop relationships towards organized people power. We coach and support leaders, campaigns, and organizations. We offer learning opportunities to develop leadership and build trainers and coaches. We create spaces where our global community can actively learn from and support each other through online sessions and member-led groups. We create and document resources for pedagogical development. We are organizing practitioners, educators, and organizations from 75 countries, and we invite you to join our community as organizations or individuals. Individual membership is $100 a year, and you can access all of our learning opportunities and resources and be part of a vibrant global community. Please visit leadingchangenetwork.org to become a member or contact info@leadingchangenetwork.org for more information today. In this series of podcasts, we are going to highlight campaigns from around the world that use the community organizing framework. After the opening episode with Marshall Gantz, each following episode will focus on each of the 5 leadership practices: public narrative, relationship building, team building, strategy, and action. We hope these episodes inspire you to further explore and practice organizing.
Okay, we're taping this one on a Friday morning on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I'm excited about today's episode because it's another in our joint series, our organising series that we're doing with the Leading Change Network. And today we are going to be examining a community organising campaign that took place in Mexico. And to help me unpack that campaign, we're joined by a wonderful organiser. She's a co-founder of Via Educacion. She's a pedagogical director of that organisation. But first and foremost, she is an organiser, and she's joining me from Monterrey in Mexico. Mariali Cardenas, welcome back. Oh, sorry, I should say welcome to Socially Democratic. We've spoken so much over the last couple of weeks. It feels like we're doing the interview again. But no, welcome to for the first time to Socially Democratic. How are you?
Thank you so much, Stephen. So happy to be here with you and everybody. I hope this is a great episode, and thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. This is going to be a great episode because this is a campaign that happened in a time where I think anyone that's listening to this show will have experiences because it happened during COVID. And even though that I know that around the world there was differences in the way different governments handled the pandemic, certainly the lived experience of people around the world is very, very similar, in which we all experienced, stay-at-home orders or lockdowns or a whole bunch of other different ways in which we, had to remain separate. But you organised whilst we had to remain separate, and I think that's a really incredible campaign. So we're going to unpack that today. But before we get into that, let's talk a bit more about yourself. How did you end up becoming an organiser?
Oh, yeah. Well, this runs maybe 20 years ago. When I was in college, I was very conscient about the poverty, the situations of inequality around my town and my country. And I tried several things before I started to understand more about organizing. For example, one time I saw that there were some injustices on rights for the indigenous community. So I asked everybody to go to the streets and say that we would not agree with the government in that moment. And many people went. Actually, I think maybe 500 of us were in the streets with their little signs. but nothing really happened. And then I returned back and I thought, what should I do now? And at that time I was in the student council of the university in college. And I thought maybe we should send some food to these communities. So we actually asked everybody to bring in, I don't know, rice and sugar and food to send to the mountains. And we did. We actually sent about two big trucks, maybe 3 tons of food to the mountains. But at the end, we didn't know actually if it helped or if it changed anything. So I thought that maybe I should go deeper into more transcendental ways of trying to change things in the world. At that time, everybody is very idealistic, and I was one of them. And then I thought maybe first I should try to understand my reality. So I went to live to the mountains with those people and peasant families. I lived there for a year, and when I was there, I saw the reality of poverty. It wasn't anything romantic.
Mm.
Things are very harsh for the children over there. But at the same time, I saw that they had a lot of potential of learning. And if they had more opportunities, maybe they could do something about their lives and those of their communities. So I went to Harvard because I had studied Paulo Freire, who's a critical pedagogic, and you probably have heard of him, everybody. So I went to GSE. He had been a teacher there. So I thought that I was going to study more about critical education at the School of Education. But it happened that it wasn't that easy. I ended up taking a class about Paulo Freire, but then I found Marshall Ganz's organizing class. And well, that made a difference because I could understand better the problems that I had seen in the mountains and how my own efforts, weren't very well sustained. And the organizing framework went through my heart and my mind and made me return to Mexico to do different stuff in a different way.
Thank you for sharing that, Mariali. There's a thread through your story there that is all grounded in education, and I'm interested. And obviously, this campaign that we're about to talk about is grounded in and
Yes.
around education. I'm interested in knowing, was there a moment in your life where the value of getting a good quality education was shaped? Where did you learn that? Where did you get a sense of this was important to me?
Yes. Well, I've thought about this before, Stephen, and I've learned recently that my great grandmother, she started at school, but she didn't know how to read. But she thought that people should know how to read and write, so she founded a school many years ago during times of revolution here in Mexico in a harsh context. And my grandma was the first generation to go to college, and the other side, my grandpa also, he studied to be a veterinarian. That was something a little bit difficult around those times, beginning of the last um, yeah, 19, maybe 1920 or something like that. And since then, I guess in my family it runs the importance of learning and of having the opportunity to learn, but it's mixed with justice. It's not only education for education, it's education to do something about your life and those of that of your community. But I remember a particular moment when I thought, this is what I have to do. And it was in the mountains. I was working with a couple of kids, and you can imagine that scenery surrounded by mountains and in a school with very poor conditions. We were actually trying to draw in the ground in the dirt with a couple of crayolas, and we had bring some materials. And I saw the spark in their eyes. I saw the way that these kids, malnourished, maybe with the context of violence, many very factors, but they wanted to learn, and I saw their potential. And that's when I thought, this is justice. If they have better learning opportunities, maybe they will have a better life opportunity. That's why I thought that maybe we should do something with education. And I think that's something that stayed with me, that image, for a long time.
That's fantastic. So here we are in this campaign that we're about to unpack, and I want to step it through for our listeners by beginning by asking, um, who were the people that you were organising? Who was the constituency that you were seeking to organise in this campaign?
Yes, well, it was, we started this campaign in 2020, maybe it was January, and we were tired. We were mothers that had our children at home, and we were seeing that the things were going to change, and that they had been changing in other parts of the world, but in Mexico they weren't changing. So we started organizing other moms around the school where I have my own kids. But that wasn't enough. Then we found that we had to get together with parents association here in the local area, and with other nonprofit organization leaders from nonprofit organizations that were related to education as well. And then we started to expand. We also talked to physicians, pediatrics that were also with us and thinking that kids should return to school. But basically, it was we gathered 90 organizations. We started first with 30 organizations, and it started to grow this movement until we ended up with 90 organizations and maybe 20,000 parents that signed up a petition. And with the whole group, we were representing maybe 200,000 parents in the area.
And so, what was the problem? What was the issue that you were trying to fix at this moment in time? Because obviously this was during COVID, but let's go sort of into some of the more specifics about that.
Yeah. If we go back, the children that were in the initial stages of education were very harmed about the lockdown. For example, I'm in the field of education, but my daughter, who was almost 80 years old, wouldn't read anything, and that was something that I couldn't, manage. I think this is important. And even if I tried a lot to teach her, and she wasn't, maybe too easy to being taught. So I thought, wow, this is a child that is in a home with somebody that is behind her to try to help her understand and learn what is happening to the rest of the people, especially those that are in very vulnerable conditions, children of those parents that have to work all day and that were out of the home. And we learned that many of the kids in this area in Monterrey were left at home alone with maybe a broken cell phone, where their teachers would send them some sort of homeworks, but it was too long, Stephen. By then we had been locked down for maybe a year, and we started to see that it wasn't possible that they were going to return soon, because we didn't see any type of willingness from authorities. The opposite, they were very harsh on anybody that tried to do something about coming back to school.
So this is so. I think we're all trying to forget all the dates about COVID, but so COVID kind of kicked off around the world around March 2020, didn't it? And so this is now situate us in the timeline now where this is a year later, right?
Yeah, 2021. I'm sorry. Yeah, exactly.
And I'm trying to think about, I don't know, all the parents listening to this will know exactly when their kids started to go back to school. But I'm thinking that around the world, schools were starting to, children were starting to return back to school in some capacity in most Western democracies. I think that would be right, in that sort of that second year of COVID. Is that, I mean, that's what you were seeing that was happening around the world, but it wasn't happening in your home country of Mexico, correct?
Exactly. We saw how kids in France or in Europe, and even in Texas, that is 200 miles from where I am right now, they were coming back to school, but not here. Mexico was one of the countries that had the longest lockdown, even in Latin America.
So naturally, you would be thinking, oh, well, maybe the health authorities within Mexico would be saying to the government, look, we can't send the kids back to school because of these reasons at this point in time. And that's sort of what would have been happening, say, in my country here in Australia. All of our public policy decisions were driven by the health authorities. But in your country, that wasn't the case. Why weren't? It was political, wasn't it? Why weren't the kids being sent back to school?
Yes. At the beginning, we thought that it was actually that they didn't have information, that they were scared for, something that wasn't really research based or scientifically based. And we went to talk to the authorities. We actually talked to the Minister of Health at that time. At that time, when we talked to him, kids wouldn't be allowed to go even to the park. Can you imagine? Not to the supermarket or to any playgrounds. The playgrounds were, tapped with little ropes that wouldn't allow, and you could be fined if you were outside. It was ridiculous. So when we went to talk to him, he started to allow children to go it's to some places, to the park, and places that were outside, they were allowed to, but not the supermarket. To the supermarket, maybe it was 2 months after that talk. However, we had started to understand that kids weren't coming back to school because there were some political reasons, like you were saying. And we were at that time in time of elections. So these authorities were going out of their period, and the new candidates were starting to make campaign for the next period. And they didn't want to move anything. The schools, after 2 years maybe of nobody being there, they were very destroyed, and they needed a lot of economical resources to restore these schools. And we started to understand that those funds weren't going to go to the schools. In Mexico, it's very sad, but we still have a lot of corruption, and we weren't sure what were they going to do with those funds. And there was no commitment. The authorities, after that first talk that we had with them, never took back the phone again. We couldn't talk to them. They were like narrowed and closed down. And we, very naively, we thought that, oh, it's because they don't have protocols. Okay, so we gather a lot of experts. Let's prepare the protocols, and we can give them to them because we're specialists in education. We can tell them how to return. We make maybe 6 plans to return, so we could share it with the authorities, and kids could come back. But no, it was impossible to talk to those authorities. So we started talking with the new authorities that were coming to office, the candidates. And this was very interesting. At that moment, we had a lot of momentum of our campaign. So, with that power that we demonstrated to these candidates, they signed a commitment to end up the lockdown and to appoint a very qualified person as Minister of Education, so this person could actually do something about the educational crisis that we're living at that time. And it was good that we got the 3 candidates who signed that commitment. So any of them that would be elected would follow with what the civil society asked for.
Okay, so what I find interesting about this is it actually almost became an electoral organising campaign as you got closer to the elections. But we'll go into that more in a bit detail in a moment. But I guess what I want to get a sense is, why hadn't the problem been solved? So you talked about this political corruption, but paint us the picture, because obviously these schools have been dormant now for 12 months.
Yeah.
What state are the schools in? Like, why was there a lack of willingness by the government to try and solve this problem?
Yeah, the problem was very big. For example, the government didn't pay electricity or water services for the schools. So there was a debt that somebody had to pay so we could have electricity to come back. The grass in the schools, because we also started brigades to go to the schools to help paint and cut the grass was like 2 meters high, and covered. For example, the toilets had been stolen. The glass from the windows, the cables, everything was taken. So schools were many schools, maybe not all of them, 50% of them were very bad conditions, and they couldn't return weren't ready to for the kids. The teachers, many of them were willing to return, but they said we can't return in these conditions. And without the support, the pedagogical support of the government, they couldn't return either. They didn't have protocols. They didn't have any sanitizers or equipment or material to receive children back. Actually, there was one meeting, very interesting meeting, with the governor of the state and the Minister of Health and Education at that time. They gathered, I don't know, maybe we were, I think, like 1,000 people in a very large Zoom at that time. And the meeting was about what could happen if kids went back. And they showed pictures of children, tucked in. And when we knew by then, with science, that this was the minimum percentage of children. Of course, there was a risk, but we were losing more not to go to school than what we actually would lose if something happened in a percentage. I mean, every human life is of course valuable, but in this case, it was hurting much more children than it was helping them.
Okay, so we've got this situation where the schools aren't open; they're in disrepair. We've got a government that doesn't want to move. They're even starting to sort of I guess, spread fear amongst the community about what would happen if you returned to school. So you've started to organise, and we talked a little bit about your constituency before, but I want to sort of dive into that now in terms of, and I think our listeners would be interested. So you're the co-founder of this organisation, but how did you slowly bring more people into this campaign?
Yeah, well, we knew that we had to increase the awareness around us, and at that moment, I talked to my friend Ignacio Ibarzabal, who's also Marshall Ganz's former student, and he's in Argentina. And I talked to him, hey, Nacho, we're doing this in Mexico. How could we really get people to join this movement and get involved? And he said, oh, we're just ending a similar campaign in Argentina, because the school years are, in different phases. And they helped us a lot. They helped us to understand how should we talk to people, and how should we engage, because many parents were also afraid. So he helped us with what they learned over there, how we could bring people to understand that, and first in a very more conceptual way, we shouldn't have fear. But in a process, he suggested the part of having the signatures to and this is the way that many parents helped. They would organize, as leaders of their own school communities, other parents, so they could join through the signature of a petition. And so this was very interesting. Yeah.
Okay, great. We'll come back to that now. We'll come back to that as well, because I want to talk about tactics later on. So how did you, at this time, how did you begin to speak with members of your campaign to work out what it would take to solve this problem? Like developing your strategy, like working out what exactly how do we solve this problem? What do we need to do?
Yeah. Well, we had every Thursday we had a meeting with the leaders of the organizations that had signed in. As I was saying at the beginning, we only had maybe 30 organizations that had joined this movement, but then consciousness started to spread, because each of these 30 people brought in other leaders from other organizations. And so at the end, we were 90 organizations, and every Thursday we develop new strategies to approach the situation. For example, we had how do you say, press conferences every 15 days. So we will maintain in the agenda of the local news the issues of returning to school. And we had several forums with experts of the topic. And so this was a way to maintain the momentum of the importance of coming back to school. And every time the governor of the state say, no, we're not coming back, we thought, hey, yay, he's listening to us, because he's answering especially to what we're asking for. And this gave us more power. And so it was very interesting that it was an implicit dialogue with authorities, but through what the people were actually asking in different ways, through their signature, or in the parks finding more signatures, or going outside schools demanding to come back, or different tactics that each of them started to develop.
So, I mean, I guess the strategic goal would be obvious, which is to get the kids back to school. But I mean, more specifically, did you have, when you're working out what your strategic goal would be, or maybe even some of the nested goals below that, can you talk us through that process about how you're trying to zero in on
Yes.
what you're trying to achieve?
Yes. It was a parallel of like in two dimensions. One was the one that you said, we have to be back by at the most October 2021. We have to be back in school at that time. But then we started to see that it was going to be very difficult, because teachers were non-supported, schools were in such bad conditions. So we thought, what are we going to do? So we actually got together and prepared 7 documents that we worked with next Minister of Education that was going to be appointed in October. And this person, she's very qualified. Actually, she has a PhD at Harvard, and she had worked in the Ministry of Education before. And her name is Sofia Leticia. Excellent person. She's still running the office right now. And we thought that we could work with her in a better way together, because it's not only a problem that the government could solve. It had to be together with civil society. And at that point, we had many organizations ready to help and support in different ways. For example, there was a group of how do you say, people from the private sector who very kindly, or they shared the resources to restore, I think, maybe 50 schools. And so the whole community started to organize regarding this issue. And what we wanted is that in the agenda, the general agenda of the state government, there could be a space for children and the right to learn and the right to develop as the healthiest possible way.
So you talked about these parallel strategic goals that you're working towards. Tell me, I think we talked about this in our previous catch-ups, but there was stuff around trying to prepare packs or pedagogical tools for the teachers as well. So because what I found was interesting, you said, okay, this is the October 2021 is when we want to get back. But in doing that, we've realized, there's a whole heap of other challenges that we need to address as well. And preparing the teachers was one of them. Just talk us through the work that had to be done in that respect as well.
Yeah, we had like I was saying, these tools. There were 6, how do you say, work tables, or groups of researchers and specialists and parents and teachers that got together. And one of them was how to bring kids back to school, the protocols, health protocols. But also we needed the pedagogy to support learning. In that time, we had these groups that come and go, and several hours with some of them. And that implied a lot of organization from the school to have kids go and come and go. And also there was tools for how do you say, the kids that are from 0 to 6 years old, that they had to be received in a different way. Also tools regarding, let's see, parent organizations, so that they can develop as a health committee based with parents support in each school. And different tools that we could hand to the Ministry of Education, so they can from there start their own process of bringing back teachers and children and parents. And they actually used them with the new person that was appointed. We worked with her 6 months after they came back to school. So they had the support from the whole community to do this work. And it wasn't easy, even that the schools were open. Maybe by December that year, 30% of the children had come back, because it wasn't easy to return.
Once you've got your strategic goal or goals, then you've got to do a power analysis. And I want to get an overview from you about who are the actors right across this campaign. We've spoken about the constituency that you were organising, which is essentially the parents of the children that are impacted. But you've touched on a little bit about who are the other supporters that you're trying to bring into this work. I want to get a sense of exactly how, this was only in the state of Monterrey. Is that right, where you were initially organising?
Yes.
Yep.
Correct. Yes.
So the folks that you're bringing into the campaign, but also who was the people that were opposed to you? And was there any competition in the work that you're doing as well?
All right. Okay. Well, yeah, we brought in leaders from social organizations, nonprofits, university, college academics, physicians, specialists, and human rights and children's rights organizations. And I guess the opposition, there was one parents association that were colluded with the government, and also they were spreading fear among some parents, and this was very difficult. At the beginning, they started to work with us, but somehow in the middle of the process they left, and they were very opposed of the return. And this was difficult because very confusing for parents to listen to one thing from one side and the other, and people were afraid at that time. It wasn't easy to decide to send your kids back to school with so much fear. But we made a survey with all our connections from all these nonprofits that work with schools. I guess we had a return maybe of 4,000 answers from teachers, and also similar number from parents. And we saw that the general public really wanted to come back. if they had the support and the resources to come back. So that helped us a lot to maintain our goal and an energy that it was validated that this was important and people wanted to come back, but it wasn't very possible that time. I guess that was one. And let's see, at the same time there was another group of moms, and that they were a little bit louder, like they did some they tried to do some marches, to go outside and say this is not fair. And I wouldn't say opposition, this was also helpful because it was they would bring attention to this issue, and we worked also somehow together with them so we could join forces in that time.
Was that challenging? Because I think that's something that we find difficult in this work, is that you can have organizing with your leadership and your constituency, and you've got your strategic goal, and you've mapped out what your tactics and timeline is. Yet then you have another group on the other, in your same sort of space that will probably share your values, right? But may have a different strategic goal, or maybe using different tactics, and they're tactics that don't necessarily align with yours, or the timing's all out of whack. You're maybe sending out a survey and they're trying to do a protest on the steps of the government buildings, and it's like, well, can't we hold off? How was that challenging with that mums group? Were you able to work out your I don't want to say differences, but were you able to work together, or have some success in that respect?
Yes, it was funny. We were in constant communication, and as you say, we were on the same side and values. However, the tactics were different, and they would say, "Why don't you join us? Why don't we go
Mm,
everybody to the street?" And but at the beginning, we had our power based on the leaders from the organizations that were part of the movement, and many of them didn't want any kind of confrontation. We were based on dialogue and constructive possibilities, and work together with authorities and different agents and groups from community to everybody join together and do something about the situation. So we couldn't be as disruptive as sometimes we would wish to be, because we would lose more than what we would gain.
mm.
So this was like something that we maintain as a value. We need to open dialogue and communication, and stay calm and in a more like attentive way to incorporate people in a constructive way.
So, I mean, that's an interesting point you picked up there. So, clearly, what I'm getting from as you describe the diversity of your constituency that you're organising, um, how did you manage to, like, what were like you talked about, one of the challenges is we can't be so disruptive, but how did you manage to um, keep the group together, like maintain this sort of collective shared purpose, working towards a common goal without people dropping off because of, lack of momentum, or maybe they just got really busy all of a sudden, or, this is more of a commitment than I initially thought, or, these are the constant growing pains of when you're doing organizing, right? How did you manage to deal with all of those internal challenges within this big organization that you're slowly growing?
Yeah, I smiled because there was a lot of energy, a lot of adrenaline during this time. Because at the same time that the government was being more strong to block the possibilities of coming back, actually, they went to one school that opened, and they took everybody and find them, and it was a big thing that blocked the possibilities to come back. But every time that happened, at the same time, we were learning more about it was possible to return, and many other countries were returning, even in Latin America, for example, Argentina and other countries were returning. So the world pressure helped us to know that we're about to get to the point
Mm.
that we want to get there. So it's just a moment to continue saying what we think, and changing the paradigm about the possibility of children coming back. And I guess that our press conference were very important, because we also provided public with another side of the opinion, so they can learn. I remember that they would call to my cell phone, "Hi, I'm from the radio station, I don't know what, and what do you think about?" And it was very confrontative, because I was live at the radio, and well, I took the opportunity to say what we were talking about. children should go back. We have to trust that the health procedures will work and children will be fine. And I remember that one time I found a friend. I listened to you in the radio. It was funny that well, news were getting around that how it was possible to return, and I guess that's something that we maintained. And every time that things seemed that it would be harder to go back, but at the same time, it was a matter of time that we would come back to school. Yeah.
So you've got this great organisation you're pulling together. What I find remarkable is the sort of the diversity of skills and interests of the folks that were getting involved in this campaign. Just talk about some of the resources that they can bring to this work, and then how did you start to formulate? How do we organize those resources in such a way that builds our power to get what we want? So therefore coming up with a theory of change. But first of all, just give us a sense of what kind of resources were people who were getting involved in this campaign bringing to this work?
Yeah, I would say time in the first place, and actually using the one-on-one technique. I mean, that was amazing. Every time that I met with somebody, we started connecting in the values and in the needs of our own children and community. Then immediately they were, yeah, tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. So everybody started doing that. Not only me. I was in the leading team, but this grew very fast. So everybody was doing that with their own constituencies in schools or in universities, and so very soon there was a very interested group. I guess our resource was our connections, the legitimacy, is that a word, of
Yep.
the issue. Yeah, people, it had some sort of truth in the bottom, and people, I guess, as humans, we are attracted to truth and to freedom and to opportunity and to growth. And I guess that's something that we just expressed and we put in a narrative, and using the one-on-ones to share that with other people helped us a lot.
Fantastic. So in the end, what was your theory of change for your campaign?
We Yeah, we changed it. At the beginning, we thought that it was going to be very easy. We would be in dialogue with the authorities. We will help them to develop these materials so they could, build a plan to come back to school. And that was our theory of change, and interdisciplinary tables of work and stuff. But then when they didn't answer back, then we thought to reframe. And at that point, our theory of change was um, increasing the number of people and organizations that were in our own movement, with one-on-ones and with leadership trainings for each of them, and having our strategy meetings every Thursday, and at the same time talk to the new candidates and have them commit to the possibility of returning in October and appointing a person that could be capable of uh, facing the educational crisis that was developing.
Okay, that's interesting. So would it be fair to say that initially your first theory of change kind of was like a power with? You thought you had power with the government in that if we just work together, we can create the change. But they stopped taking your phone calls and then realized, oh, we're in a power over scenario. Therefore, we have to work out where we find the power. This is a hypothetical that probably is an unfair question. But if the elections weren't on at that time, so therefore you didn't have this opportunity to work with opposition candidates, what would you have done?
I think at that time we had a database of a lot of people. I don't remember the number right now. We were starting to talk to tech people to help us design a procedure to contact everybody and to actually do something larger, maybe a protest or something with everybody that had signed in. And I think that we would have done that. We were holding ourselves to do that because we saw that there were possibilities in the other way, but we were ready to do that. Mhm.
Okay, it's interesting. Okay, so let's talk about the tactics and the timing. So you've got your strategic goal. We've got our theory of change, which is centered around leveraging the oppositional parties to commit to our goal, and working with them. Let's talk about the tactics from the start and the timing of those tactics. Where did you begin? What was the first thing you started to do? So, I mean, you've mentioned like one-on-ones and weekly meetings on Thursdays and and a whole bunch of other things. But let's give our listeners a sense of what did the foundation phase of the campaign look like to begin with?
Uh-huh. Yeah, we also had to have like the support from physicians and the health supporters like pediatrics and the how do you say, the College of Pediatrics, is that
Yep,
a word?
yep,
Yep.
yep.
So that wasn't easy at the beginning, but then we managed to get a hold of them, and they wrote a letter of support, and that was very important. So that was one tactic. Another tactic was that we actually made, how do you say, we went to the Office of Human Rights and we placed, how do you say,
Petition.
a petition, yeah, in
Yep.
favor of children's rights, and it went through. So there were means to pressure governments to change the authority in not coming back to school, because human rights was saying come back to school, the decisions were saying coming back to school, the academics. So we gathered authority from different members of the community to change the authority of what we were trying to do and what we should had it should be done. And it wasn't easy to have the parents, because everything was virtual. We had
Mm.
our virtual meetings and through different. So I think that was a limitation to our tactics. We never saw each other together in presence, but we actually did go to the parks when we were asking for the signatures in all around the metropolitan area, and it was very nice to talk to people directly and see how they would change their thoughts about coming back to school and how they offered to support as well. Yeah.
So that's how you gathered I was going to ask, that was my follow-up question. How did you manage, if you're all in lockdown, how did you manage to get the people to sign the petitions? Was it a physical petition, like, a piece of paper and a pen, or did you have an online petition? Like, how did you go about collecting these signatures?
It was in both ways. We had a website where you could join and write your name and everything there, and it was this was very good. Also from our friends from Argentina, this tactic helped us to say, okay, let's go for 1,000 signatures, and now we're going for 5,000 signatures. We're going also so close to 20,000 signatures, and this also helped us to motivate and celebrate our achievements and continue to grow with that.
So was the gathering of the signatures essentially the first, I guess I would say, our first peak in the campaign? And then what was the next sort of peak that you wanted to work towards after the gathering of the signatures? How did that culminate? So you gathered all the signatures. How many did you get in the end? How many signatures did you collect?
20,000, I guess, at the
20,000.
end.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
huge. And so you've gone in and have you presented that to the Department of Human Rights, or is that where you presented those signatures?
Yes, and also to the government, and also to because they would say no, parents don't want to come back, and we said yes, we want to come back. Here's the survey,
Mhm.
also the survey that we made, and also the signatures and all this, that support from the leaders, and so it was a way to interact with the narrative that they had against coming back to school, so we
Yeah.
could have evidence that it wasn't exactly like they were saying. Um, but also, I guess having another important tactic was having in the news this topic continuously. Maybe every other day there was something about the lockdown and the children and testimonies, and we got together with the main, how do you say, uh, TV, radio, and newspapers locally, and we talked to them and we said, "This is important that you support this issue, and please help us to make this public." And they did. So it was very important to have them on our side.
And when you presented the petition to the government, how did you create that as a moment of showing your power? Like, did you have key leaders go in and present that petition? Tell us about the actual day that you presented that petition to the government.
Yeah, well, we had a meeting with the Minister of Education, but they disregarded the signatures.
Mm.
It wasn't something that that they would take into account, and we were prepared for that. they would say yes, but still we're not coming back. So at that point, that's where we thought we can't waste our time with these guys because they're not going to do anything. It's so logically it was a path that we thought that they would follow, but emotionally and other situations and variables didn't allow them to do it. So that's when we started working with candidates, and they were more interested in listening to us, and they saw the petition and they agreed to return when if they went to office. And also the appointment of the Minister of Education was something very transcendental because it taps into more a structural way to face this situation.
And I imagine what do you think that the opposition candidates saw in your movement that then motivated them for them to be a part of? Like, if you had a petition that only had 500 signatures on it, do you think that they would be?
Yeah, no, I remember that meeting. I was sitting down with other people from the community, decision makers from the community, and you know, I don't know. Sometimes you find like strength from your heart, or I don't know where. But I remember that he was like going around his platform of whatever proposals that he had in his government. I said, you have a problem in your hands. This is a bomb that is going to explode, and you're going to solve it. These kids don't know how to read and write. They're going to miss out elementary, and they're not going to access middle school. What are you going to do? And here's civil society, and we're asking you to sign this petition, bring them back, and we will support you so that you can have more strategies to have children learn and come about this educational crisis. And you need someone that will actually help you, not just appoint someone because he's your friend or she's your friend or whatever. You need someone that is really going to approach this problem and solve it. And I guess that he understood. I think that I presented that strategy, I don't know, the catastrophic situation, the nightmare, like Marshall always says in the narrative. If you don't do this, this is going to happen. But if you do this, then it might turn out different. And I think that's where we got them.
So I love that. Marshall will also love that. So the hope versus hate, nightmare versus the dream scenario. So you've got them on this dream scenario. What tactics did you deploy in this sort of second part of the campaign after you've delivered the petition? Like, what did you do to work with these opposition leaders to get to your strategic goal?
Oh, yeah. Well, what we did is that in Mexico, there's this transition team that prepares to take office, and we started working with them directly. We brought all the protocols and all the materials that we had developed, and we started having meetings every week to develop the plan that would bring kids back to school. So we wouldn't allow that the October would come by and, we're not prepared again. No, we were going to be prepared because they opened the door to work with us.
Did your campaign work with those opposition candidates to help them get elected, though, as well? Like, was that a part of your strategy?
This is implicit. I guess that that's what they were hoping for.
Mm-hmm.
And but at the end, the three of them signed the petition, signed the commitment to come back. So our own movement didn't advocacy for any of the three parties.
Okay.
We advocacy for the return to school,
So you started the second part of the campaign. You've actually started to work with the transition politicians or leaders into government. Is there anything in there that is worth just sort of, your reflections on that? Like, how easy was that? Like, did you need to hold them to account? Were they a little bit slippery in times where they tried to get out of the commitments that they'd given to you earlier in the campaign? Or was it something that it was, was it like a sort of a power with sort of scenario where you were working quite collaboratively with this transition team? Tell us a bit about that experience.
Yeah, no, it was very good because when we had elections and one of the candidates that had signed the commitment was elected, so he had agreed to appoint a person. We actually helped him to have a different candidate so he could, bring into office, and the person that came out was the best one, and so we started working together with her and her team in order to establish the more precise plan to come back to school. So it wasn't hard at that time. The thing was that the other government was still in office, so they wouldn't allow any change yet. We had to wait until they actually took office, the new one, to start implementing all the protocols and all the procedures that we were planning.
Sounds like a very Trumpian kind of handover of exchange of power going on in Monterrey and Mexico as well. So, in the end, what did you achieve? Like, what was talk us through the campaign goal? Did you achieve your campaign goal? When did you achieve your campaign goal?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, we established the children's rights in the agenda of the local government, and not only the government, also among the community, the private sector, academics, and everybody. So that was one important goal. Nobody was talking about children before that. We were able to reopen public spaces as we had planned in March 2021. Parks and these open public spaces. We couldn't negotiate with authorities that we had initially thought to work with, and but we discovered why, these political and corruption issues behind that. But we did accomplish to negotiate with the new authorities and gain their commitment to reopen schools in October. And we followed up with them in this crisis that was evolving. And well, one of our goals was to align values of maybe 200,000 people in favor of children's rights. I guess that's the most important one, and it has preserved through time. And at first, we wanted to organize maybe 30, 50 organizations. That was our goal. But we accomplished a movement of 90 organizations, so we surpassed that goal. And well, this group supported the development of the return to school and the plan to have that possible for more than 1.5 million children that were part of this community. So we're very proud of doing that, and also the support that came afterwards, so they could have the best education that they can have with the support of this new Minister of Education.
Listening to you read out all of those goals that the campaign achieved and thinking back to where you were right at the start of the campaign and having a bit of time to reflect on it, because obviously this is a couple of years ago now. How does that make you feel when you reflect on what was achieved by this campaign?
Um, well, I want to return to my initial moment of when I decided to start this campaign with my kid, my little girl, not knowing how to read. And after a couple of years, now she says, "I know what you do, Mom. You open schools so children can learn better."
That's great.
And I don't know if that's what I'm doing right now or have done. If I, but I guess it's very close to my heart, the possibility of having worked to open opportunities so kids can learn. That's my vocation. That's my purpose in life. And just I guess I just shared a little bit of who I am with this, and found a lot of people that we worked together, finding that I wasn't alone in this purpose, and I guess that we wouldn't have done it together if we weren't so profoundly moved by this possibility of coming back and opening opportunities for children.
That's fantastic. Let's do a bit of an evaluation of the whole campaign, and how we normally do it is obviously through pluses, deltas, and key learnings. I think that you've named a whole heap of pluses, which is all of the goals that you achieved. But are there any other pluses that you take away, or when you reflect on the campaign, that you want to share?
I guess there's another plus that we have seen that it has transcended time, is the social commitment for education. That's something that UNESCO is asking us to do. and not leave everything to the authorities, but to get the whole community involved in finding out what each of us should do to improve the conditions of learning for many children. And so I guess that's something that we also help to do here in Monterrey. After that, we still have communication, has prevailed communication with different big organizations, foundations, and representatives of many nonprofits, that we have to do this together. And we have continued on that work, and we continue to, not only in this part of Mexico, but also in the whole country, where we have to get together and use this organizing framework to find out what's our new strategic goal and pursue that.
Yes, I mean it's the thing, isn't it, that we all think that once we've achieved our strategic goals, that the world is now a better place and we all can go and rest. But no, there are always more mountains that we must climb and start again, which is a whole nother podcast, Mariali, that we must get you back for to do that. But maybe not today. Let's move to the deltas. What were some of the things you would change when you reflect on the campaign, if you had your time again?
Yeah, I think at the beginning we were in a very logical mood. We weren't considering the part of motivation and values, a part of the heart, the narrative, And I think I would do that differently. Also, at the beginning, we thought that, or how do you say, interlocutor or we were exchanging communication with the authorities, but then our friends from Argentina told us, no, you have to talk to the people, so we were a little confused on who were our people. At the beginning, we thought that we should organize the government, but it wasn't like that. And very soon we found out that it was the parents, it was the organizations, it was every other people that were more convinced to changing this. And then that's also something I would have done differently. I guess it was also very difficult, the part of the technology. Many people thought that just by resending stuff through WhatsApp or whatever platform, then they're participating. But I guess there's something more. It's not just because you see a post, then you're organized. You have to become a member of something. So I guess we would use technology in a different way, and to maybe have people commit in the development of local leadership more, face to face.
Okay. And then, I mean, that's the thing that we sometimes, and I know Marshall talks about this a lot, is that we just get a little bit obsessed with technology and we think that all our solutions when it comes to organizing is through technology. But in the end, you still need to it's relational. You must build relationships with people. And that requires you to actually talk to someone, whether it be on Zoom or over a coffee or in a school park. You have to meet people where they are. And then lastly, key learnings or key takeaways from this campaign, which I'm fascinated to hear about.
Yeah, the problem the problem of not being face to face. I think we would have had more training sessions with our volunteers and leaders, so they could do more, because people were so willing to do stuff, and we weren't able to capitalize that volunteer power. And maybe I would have maybe if I would have the possibility, or if you guys that are out there listening to this have the possibility, always think about the power of leadership around you and try to design specific ways to have people participate. This is very important. And also, finding the time to train in the establishing of the relationships is very important. And I guess we actually took advantage of the strategizing part of the framework of Marshall Gans, because things change so quickly, and what we thought that was happening wasn't actually happening. So we had to reframe what we were going to do. And it's very important to be flexible enough to change your theory of change and to approach your strategic goal in a better way.
Was that easy to do with such a large organization? There's so many different people involved to re-strategize, because sometimes people can be really kind of locked in. No, we did all this work on this particular strategy. Why can't we just keep doing this? I don't want to have to go back and re-strategize. Or was it was it something that the group just naturally went, oh, this is not working, we need to go back to the drawing board, so to speak?
Uh-huh. I don't think it was a perspective of discarding what we did, but it was to growing upon that, and it was easier to do because we had done the easy part. So, and it helped us as a leverage, as a new step. So now we're going to do this. Now we're going to do this. And every time it was something that maybe it seemed difficult, but at the same time, we knew we had this hope that this would bring us closer to what we wanted to get to.
Fantastic. Any other reflections on the campaign, Mariali, before we wrap up?
Well, I guess I'm studying anthropology, philosophical anthropology, and I have learned that as humans, we are prepared to be where we feel that we have to be. And I guess that if we're very conscious about ourselves, we can identify our center. So I would, invite everybody to find that center where you find hope, where you find your purpose, where you find the connection with others to develop this purpose. And that's where we have to be. This campaign for me was so fun. It was amazing. We enjoyed the whole process, even with the obstacles that we had. And that. So I guess that this is something that the framework of Marshall brings to people, a lot of hope and possibility of connect with others that have the same hope and work together and find change. And I'm so happy to be part of the board of the Leading Change Network right now, because we're always thinking how this framework can help others to also accomplish their own goals and their own purpose in life. And so thank you so much for the invitation, Stephen.
Muchas gracias. That's a beautiful reflection and a wonderful way to end today's podcast. Mariali, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing both your own story and the story of this wonderfully successful campaign. And we thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much. And everybody, you're not alone. We're together in this community, and let's get together. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you're interested in learning more about the organizing practices, please be sure to check out Leading Change Network website at leadingchangenetwork.org. We also invite you to join our community as organizations or individuals. Individual membership is $100 a year, and you can access all of our learning opportunities and resources and be part of our vibrant global community.